about this. This is a follow-up to the utility, or housing and utility affordability report we released in September. So we'll be announcing speakers. It'll be a full-day event, and hopefully encourage some great conversation. So we're looking forward to engaging you as individuals, attendees, potential sponsors for the event to make this a worthwhile endeavor. I would also like to acknowledge some people in the room today. So please stand up and be recognized if you identify or are part of this group. If you're an elected official or represent an official at the local, state, or federal level, if you would stand, we would like you to be recognized. Okay. If you are a member of the Metropolitan Housing Coalition Board of Directors, we invite you to stand up as well. And they can see who's in the room as well. And if you are a coalition member or a partner, you'd like to stand up as well to show your support for MHC. I invite you to do so as well. We are happy that you are here to support MHC, to learn more about the critical role that fair, accessible, and affordable housing plays in our community, and the importance for each and everyone, and I mean everyone, of our neighbors. I also want to give a special thank you to recognize all of the sponsors that made the 2025 report possible, especially the Louisville Metro Government Office of Housing and Community Development, to our report foundation sponsors, Metro United Way, PNC Bank, Rebound, and the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and to the event sponsor for today's release event, LGD Development. Thank you for supporting today's report release, and please join me in recognizing each of these organizations and continue to make the State of Metropolitan Housing Report a reality. So thank you. The 2025 State of Metropolitan Housing Report, entitled Housing Louisville's Workforce, Connecting Community with Economic Opportunity, is MHC's 22nd Annual Housing Report. This year's report focuses on how Louisville Jefferson County's housing challenges are rooted in long-term structural imbalances between where people live, work, and can afford to live. Addressing these issues will require coordinated policy reform, cross-sector partnerships, and data-driven implementation. It will also be important to address the housing needs across the entire housing continuum, especially at the lowest household income levels, to make possible a roof over everyone's head in this community. Some things to pay attention to in this report include relationships between household formation and housing construction, Louisville's aging population and the slower growth of younger generations, creating a need for diverse types of housing focused on affordability, accessibility, diversity, and age-friendliness. Yes, diverse, equitable, and inclusive housing. The number of cost-burdened renters, rising utility costs are a key indicator of housing instability, fair market rents versus median rents, service sector wages and mortgage affordability and median home prices, JCPS student homelessness numbers, it's increased yet again, even though we've had a lower enrollment, and the increase in the price of single-family homes, mortgage rates, and average and median mortgages. All of these data points and more are contributing to the imbalances in where we can afford to live, where we work, and where economic opportunity is strongest and accessible. This is by historical design and in many respects continues to this day. The 2025 State of Metropolitan Housing Report digs into all of these questions and data points, outlining the current relationship between housing and both workforce and economic development opportunities, and makes key recommendations on the path for Louisville. Before I turn it over to our partners on this report, I would be remiss if I did not mention the federal chaos in the housing and homelessness world. We have seen proposed federal budgets that run the full spectrum on housing, from slash and burn to dumpster fire to stagnation with few increases. We have recently seen a continuum care proposal that is a threat to homelessness services, providers, and permanent supportive housing, when a coalition in our city launched a permanent supportive housing initiative to move 250 individuals into housing. The original continuing care proposal would create instability and increased homelessness for thousands of Louisvillians and thousands more across the state and hundreds of thousands of people across the country. Although currently paused, the threats persist. Threats towards vouchers, threats to funding for affordable housing, threats to homelessness shelters and direct service providers closing across the Commonwealth. Threats to the very well-being of our neighbors, young, old, and everyone in between. And we must say the complete dehumanization of the homeless population in our urban and rural areas. This is a real threat, and it will destabilize families in our community, the people who work hard every single day and night to provide housing and homelessness services, and all the moving parts that make housing possible for our community. But I will say this, I work with amazing people. We work with amazing people. Look around you in this room, and the coalitions in this work have only strengthened in recent years. We will fight it together because upon its outcome depends the future of our city, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and the entire nation. So with that said, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Darren Wilson from Northern Kentucky University Center for Economic Analysis and Development, MHC's partner on the 2025 State of Metropolitan Housing Report. We will have time for Q&A following the presentation, and will be available for one-on-one questions afterwards as well. So, Darren, I invite you to the podium.
Hi, my name is Dr. Darren Wilson from Northern Kentucky University Center for Economic Analysis and Development. And first of all, let me say this is a fantastic crowd, much bigger than the classes that I teach. I wish I had this crowd in my local administration classes that I teach. So, all right. First, let me say it was an honor to work with MHC again this year on this report. They've been a fantastic partner. I know they're a wonderful organization here, really moving the needle on affordable housing here in Louisville, Jefferson County. And we're just so pleased to be able to contribute to the conversation, to the hard work that not just MHC, but also all of you are doing here in the community that you all love. And I will say, as a native Kentuckian myself, from Eastern Kentucky originally, that Louisville is such a centerpiece and important component for the economic and social well-being of the Commonwealth in and of itself. So, with that being said, let's get into the data a little bit. There we go. So I want to point out here, so this is looking at population growth, housing unit growth, household growth, and occupied housing units. The big takeaway, this is common across the United States, Kentucky, but I want to hone in on Jefferson County alone. You can see here that the population growth has actually been, over the past 5-year estimate, is 4.1%. So that's the number of people in Louisville, Jefferson County. However, though, when you look at household growth, so the number of households, so units, it has actually grown significantly. In other words, the demand for housing is outpacing the production of housing, the number of available units of housing here in Jefferson County, which means that if you have greater demand and less supply to meet that demand, prices are going to go up. Also, I want to note that one-person households and rent-occupied one-person households has grown significantly by double-digit numbers. So we're seeing a change in the traditional household, right? We're seeing a lot more folks looking for single-family homes, single-family units that are smaller, maybe more manageable, and that they can afford as well. Louisville, like the United States, like Kentucky, is experiencing a dramatic change in its demographics. You can see here that sort of towards the bottom there on the right-hand side, sort of the lower right-hand corner, that the 65-plus-year-old age group has actually grown by 17.2%, which is changing the types of housing, once again, and the accessibility needs that are currently available for folks here in Louisville and across the country as well. So as housing strategies and policies get developed and implemented, the idea of meeting the needs of that changing demographic, that growing demographic, as well as the social, the environmental, the accessibility aspects that are necessary to make sure that people have not just affordable housing, but also quality of housing as well. There we go. Another aspect of this is, and once again, seeing this across the United States, but here in Jefferson County specifically, and I don't think this is a shock to anybody who owns a home, the huge increase in the amount of monthly mortgage that it takes to have a house, that you have to pay, that you have the cost of the house itself. So you can see here from August 2020, towards the beginning of the pandemic, up to 2025, we saw a 31% increase in Jefferson County in the cost, median sale price of a single-family home here in the community. And then, but look at with interest rates continue to rise year after year after year. Now they are slightly down now, but we can see here an 82% increase in the estimated average monthly mortgage for somebody to buy a home from 2020 to 2025, which is, I don't know about you all, but I haven't seen my wages go up by that much. Looking at rents, we can see here that the amount in rent from a single-family bedroom to a four-person bed or four-bedroom apartment rent has increased significantly to the point where if you look at the fair market rent in Jefferson Louisville County compared to the median rent in Jefferson Louisville County, that the actual rents are increasing faster than what is available through voucher programs, for example, right? Fair market value rents that are available. So it is becoming harder for folks, especially those who rely on vouchers, that demand side of housing, to be able to find something that is affordable and quality as well. Also, we see here the percentage of renter-occupied households spending 30% or more, so 30% is that threshold, that maximum amount that is recommended, that benchmark of what somebody should spend their monthly income on housing specifically. And we have this broken down by census tract. And you can see here that the places, so the darker the color, the higher percentage of folks paying more than 30% of their income on housing is particularly concentrated in lots of census tracts on the west, I was going to say west side, but western portion of Jefferson County and the southern portion of Jefferson County as well. So you can see here where for someone who wants to, that is renting, a significant portion of folks in those areas in Jefferson County are spending more than 30%, right? So that takes away from their disposable income. It takes away from other basic needs that they have, such as food, transportation, clothing, medicines, healthcare, and so forth. As Tony mentioned, utility disconnects are another component that MHC has been tracking for years and has looked at it in previous studies. In this report as well, we looked at the monthly number of disconnects for non-payment by zip code in Jefferson County, and this continues on from last year's report as well. You can see here where a significant portion of households that have had a utility disconnected from and where that's concentrated at, right? So this is not, this is a continual problem. And once again, you think about the day-to-day needs of individuals and what they're trying to do, the lives that they're trying to lead, and so forth, right? Think about if you had your household disconnected for some reason and how much of an impact that is on your day-to-day life, right? Whether, taking care of children or a loved one, trying to find employment or having employment as well. So you can see here where this is concentrated at here in Jefferson County. So as part of, and we do a lot more writing and a lot more data on this in the report, but when we looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data and Kentucky Stats data, these are the fastest growing jobs in Jefferson County. So you have everything from nurse practitioner, down here to speech language pathologist as well. And what we did was, so you see here the table, we have projected annual job growth, the gross wages, so monthly wages for these occupations. What would be 30% of their monthly income? So what is that maximum amount that is recommended that go up to spending on housing? And then what is the maximum 30-year mortgage that person could afford? And you may not have remembered it from a few slides back, but not all of these industries, not all of these occupations could afford the median price home here in Jefferson County. So, you think about folks, for example, restaurants, think about prosthesists, machine feeders, and others, that they are part of the fastest growing occupations in Jefferson County, but yet could not afford a median household in Jefferson County. So we have to think about these jobs, these occupations that are growing, and making sure that folks who are working these industries, working these jobs, are able to afford housing. And also, I should say that, we have here the maximum 30-year mortgage. Even if you could afford the median mortgage, median house, where is that house? Is it near your place of employment? Right? How easy is it to commute, which we'll talk about here shortly. Now, when we look at it, not just in those professions, but overall, only 2/3 of workers in Jefferson County could afford a one-bedroom apartment when we looked at data from the Census Bureau as well as our own analysis of wage and employment data and looking at housing data. So workers and occupations with a median income sufficient to afford the median one-bedroom rent, only 66% of those occupations here in Jefferson County could afford the median price of a one-bedroom home. So 1 in 3 Louisvillians cannot afford the median rent, and yet are working. Cannot afford for a one-bedroom apartment. So we look at here. I have these are where the major job hubs are. So we looked at this based off of zip codes. This is also a map of not the upcoming TARP bus routes. The current ones, not the ones that are going to be implemented here shortly. But you can see here where are the job clusters, right? Around the airport, Ford Motor Factory, other places, right? You can sort of see here where the number of people employed in the zip codes are. And what's interesting about this, and you see this in the report, is that these are also the areas that have the least density, right, for housing, where there's places of employment, those major hubs. But also looking at the transportation network here in Louisville, Jefferson County, it's what we call spoke and hub model, right? Everything flows to downtown, flows back out. Not a lot of connectivity east-west. So, like around Waterson and so forth, right? I sort of use the Waterson as my guideline from east to west. But this is a concern, right, as we talk about some of the recommendations going forward. When we think about public housing and opportunities for employment, you can see here we still have the map with the number of employees based off of zip code, but the bubbles represent the number of public housing units. Look at where they're concentrated at, and we did this last year in the report as well, where they're concentrated. Not a lot of public housing units near employment centers, with the exception of the downtown area, right? So that's where, especially when you go back and look at the TARP map of public transportation, is so vital to ensure that folks who need public housing have access to not just a quality job, but also the number of job opportunities, right? That is vitally important. And actually, we don't have it in here, but I do recommend in the report, though, take a look at where refugees are being housed as well. It is not near places of employment. It's not near where the job hubs are here in Jefferson County. As Tony alluded to, I know Jefferson County Public Schools have seen a decrease in enrollment from the previous year, yet homelessness, unhoused students is up. In particular, you can see a large increase amongst the Hispanic population, Hispanic student population in JCPCS, 57% increase from the previous year. And then obviously, continuing from last year's report as well, and historically, African American children make up 50% of those that are unhoused or homeless in Jefferson County. Now, I don't know about you all, but no child should ever be without a home and be without the basic necessities of life so that they are successful, not just today, but in the future. And this is part of what economic development is about. It's ensuring that our children are prepared not only for a good quality of life, but prepared for the workforce of the future. And building the skills today is the way that the economy will continue to move forward in Jefferson County. Eviction notices, filings remain persistently high. It is slightly decreased when you look at Q1 through Q3 for all these different years. But even though that eviction filings may be down, think about the toll that it has on the families that are facing the filings, right? The insecurity that they face on a day-to-day basis, thinking that they may be evicted from their home, right? And so that's why it's important to have support systems in place to ensure that it doesn't get to this point first. And there's additional data in the report of what happens post-filing, right? But even going through the legal process can be time-consuming, takes resources, and is distracting from, once again, trying to live their day-to-day lives and take care of their loved ones. We talked about this last year when we talked about land use and zoning, and I just want to highlight this once again, is that Louisville, Jefferson County is persistently high when compared to sister peer cities elsewhere in the United States with regard to single-family homes, right? And it's not uncommon, right? There's most communities are built on the idea of single-family homes. But the housing challenges that Louisville and this country faces no longer really allows for the focus of just single-family homes, especially in the traditional sense with the large yards and lack of density and so forth. And so I just want you to think about the map and go to the report. Think about where the centers of employment are, and think about where this light blue is. You can already see where the density of employment, those are kind of white areas there that just don't have, right, that's industrial, commercial land uses there. Think about all the single-family home plots that are in those areas. And so if we want to try to ensure that people have closer access to jobs, and we know we need more housing, we need to think about density not just in the center of Louisville, in the downtown area, but out closer to where these employment hubs are. So, what can Louisville do next? Well, continuing on from last year's report, examining zoning and the continuous work that Louisville Metropolitan government has done around this area and continuing to push for increased density. And so if you have not had the opportunity to read last year's report, I highly recommend it. We have a lot of key points there that we recommend best practices from other communities around the country that have been trying to address this and some of the outcomes of that work in other places. But we need to expand housing density, reduce barriers to middle housing. We have more data in this report on middle housing, and promote mixed-use development near employment centers. Also, taking a transit-oriented approach to development, right? So, we recognize as the researchers on this project the challenges that TARC system is facing and the need for reform, but it's also about making, while the community tries to make investments in housing, also needs to consider making investments in public transportation and access between housing and places of work. So encouraging higher density, mixed-use projects around transportation hubs, right? Sort of getting away from the spoke and hub model that can strengthen economic mobility, reduce commute times. I was told 71 yesterday was a little bit of a slip and slide as well, right? So how can we reduce people's commutes and support sustainable regional growth? Increasing employer participations. The industries here in Jefferson County, this is not just a community issue, this is not just a government issue, this is a workforce issue. This is an industry issue as well, especially as these industries of the future, companies looking for employees to gain greater access to quality talent means that there has to be quality housing here in Jefferson County, close to these places of employment. So we encourage more collaboration. We provide some examples in the report where advocates, housing advocates, local governments, and employers working together to create affordable and workforce housing through joint funding opportunities, policy advocacy, and community development initiatives. The idea that many communities have an economic development plan, and traditionally, when we think about economic development, we really not integrated housing into the economic development. We usually think about tax incentives, workforce development, those sort of things, right? But the times are changing, and you look at organizations like the League of Cities, looking at the International Economic Development Council and other professional organizations, they have how-to guides, they have examples of how communities across the country have started to integrate housing policy into their economic development policy. And so as Louisville, the organizations here, government and business organizations, continue to do that work, to continue to strategize around economic development, to make sure that housing is connected to those strategies. And then looking at national best practices. So we're not reinventing the wheel here, right? Things that work other places can be tweaked and modified to the context of Louisville, Jefferson County. Great, such as employer-assisted housing programs, private sector investing in the local housing trust fund, creating more public-private partnerships. I want to highlight in the report, we talked about Santa Rosa Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, City of Charlotte, Chicago are three examples that we saw that we thought were good models and best practices of how employers and chambers of commerce and other business organizations interact with governments and nonprofit organizations to make investments into housing. And so, I know you all have the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The infrastructure is there, and so it really is a necessity to have industry and employers to be engaged in this space as well, because it not just benefits the community, it also benefits them as well. And then finally, let me leave you off on this. Building a stronger Louisville where housing supports workforce and opportunity. Once again, it's about collaboration, having data-informed pathways for the future. Housing is workforce policy, right? We all, we all experience this. As we maybe move somewhere or take a new job, you might not take a job, for example, if you don't live nearby or you realize your commute's too far, right? Or you're not able to move to have closer access to that job, right? So thinking about how housing impacts workforce, the fact that demand for housing is outpacing the supply of housing, which intensifies the cost burdens and instability of housing for families here in Louisville, Jefferson County. Rising rents, utility shutoffs, evictions, and homelessness are not just individual issues, but they're signals of a systematic stress, a systematic challenge here in Jefferson Louisville County. Major hub job centers are not connected to affordable housing or transit that is necessary to benefit both workers, individuals, and employers. Essential workers are priced out, affecting employers' ability to gain access to the new employees, as well as challenging for the economy, right? When we go back to thinking about, disposable income, being able to spend more money on other aspects that gets regenerated into the local economy. This requires coordinated action across housing, transportation, employers, and local government. All actors, all players are necessary to create real change, sustainable change. And Louisville can lead with a data-driven strategies and those cross-sector partnerships that you all have. You all have wonderful organizations here. You have MHC, you have GLI, you have United Way, you have all these wonderful organizations here that are doing really wonderful work, and just encouraging to see more collaboration happen. The work that's happening and more collaboration here in Louisville, Jefferson County. So with that, I'll turn that over to Tom.
Okay, thank you, Darren. So we want to open up the floor if there are questions. We're happy to take some Q&A right now. If not, we're happy to engage one-on-one after the fact. So if you have a question, raise your hand, stand up. Screen for them out.
My students do the exact same thing, by the way.
Don't
I'm used to silence, so.
Don't make me call you. Okay, well, thank you all for coming out today to the report. There are plenty of copies over here, so please take some back to friends, family, give them at Christmas time. Carol.
Yeah, just a quick question. The report is very good. It identifies stress points and potential solutions, but one thing seems to be missing, and that is finance.
Yes.
Where's the money coming? Tony, you mentioned some coming declines in federal funding and probably state funding as well. Can you address how we move forward in a declining financial state?
So, great question, and I actually had it in my notes, I didn't mention this, is that, so in the report we give those examples of where employers and the business community can be engaged. And all three of those examples, you saw the private sector putting money into, say, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, providing incentives for their employees, helping them buy their first home, for example. So you see examples from both on the demand side and the supply side. Now, with regard to financing, this is where economic development, so this is actually one of the classes that I teach, and I do a lot of work into economic development, is that economic development projects, a lot of them are very complex with regard to financing. And that's where economic development can be a really big contributor into how to fund affordable housing, because of the experience and the necessity for piecemealing pots of money together to create new housing opportunities and to support families that are looking for housing. And so that's where if we incorporate housing policy into economic development policy, that means that housing can also be a part of the economic development financing strategy for communities.
Yeah, and I would just add also, we need to pay attention to the Kentucky Housing Task Force recommendations, right? 14 recommendations, it's about housing supply, but there's also potential for funding sources of revolving funds coming out of that. So as we move into the 2026 legislative session, let's pay attention. We have legislature's word that housing is a key issue. Revolving loan funds, types of financing are a part of that conversation. So keep the pressure. Okay. Well, thank you for attending. Grab some reports. Stick around, network, have some conversations, and thanks for coming out.